Welcome to the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. It's time to know more so you can say no more. It's time for the Clearly Christian Podcast. Here's your host, Dr. Cy Smith.
I'm Dr. Cy Smith, and this is Clearly Christian, a podcast about what it means to see the world from God's perspective, and then the impact this has on training the next generation to live a life consistent with a biblical worldview. Thanks for listening, and if you've been listening for a while and you like the show, I'd encourage you to leave a review or hit the subscribe button. That'll let others know the show's worth listening to and help advance our cause of Christian education. Well, today we have an extra credit version of the Clearly Christian Podcast, and that's, of course, a deeper dive into our chalkboard points from our recent conversation with Superintendent John Walker of Central Christian School in Hutchinson, Kansas. The full episode is now live, so just look for the picture of Dr. John Walker and you'll be all set. So now for some extra credit, let's dive in and let's go ahead and bring in the show's producer and ask what he thought, and we'll use that as a springboard for our conversation today. So Brian, tell me your thoughts on what we talked about with Dr. John Walker.
I love the concept of leading with the end in mind, and you had a great conversation in the program about how hard it is to be a teacher. Talk to me about that. How hard is it? What do people need to know? And is it getting easier or is it getting even harder as the days go on?
Yeah, great question. You're right. No, I don't think, as I said in the I just don't think the average person realize how taxing it is. And they love it, right? People don't go into education because they want to have this grueling 180 days and they want to, be sweating profusely every day. And no, they go in because they love children typically, or a lot of times they love their subject. And so one of the two, they just really enjoy this. So they love it, but it is very, very taxing in that you have all of these personalities that just don't stop, right? And especially the younger ages, oftentimes, they can't control even some of the behavior that happens during the course of the day. So you have no idea what it's coming. I think a lot of times people will assume that teachers, they have a script ready to go and 8 to 3 is all played out and it's just well orchestrated. And if everything goes as planned, it should be a pretty easy profession. All I do is talk and you just listen to me talk and you'll take notes and get straight A's. And that is so far from actual reality because there is so many other things going on, and there always has been, but certainly in the day and the life of the average child. And so any of those things may be brought to bear on the lesson. And, of course, in education, we like to joke that, some of the best laid out lesson plans are gone 5 minutes into the lesson because something unexpected happened that completely destroyed everything. And as you might have alluded, yes, it is getting more and more difficult because of what kids are bringing to school. And I don't necessarily mean the mental baggage, but just everything. I mean, it's emotional issues, personal issues, mental issues, psychological issues. It could be things that they're dealing with at home. And yes, I know that's always been. Very, very true. But it has definitely changed, and no more are you able to maybe handle some of those issues like you used to be able to handle as a teacher, thinking that, most of my kids who are 11 years old struggle with this. So I need to be prepared to respond in this way. You could make some of those generalizations psychologically decades ago. Not anymore, because an 11-year-old may know more or experience more than you ever thought they would by that age. And they may come to you with some questions that you think, wow, I cannot believe I'm going to have to deal with this issue with a child this age.
Yeah, and Dr. Walker even said, even though these kids are in Christian schools, they're still bringing plenty of society in with them. They get plenty of society out and away from the school. What about the teachers? I'm interested in their well-being. They're Christians, at least. I mean, I know at Mansfield Christian, they're part of the Christian faith, but yet they are dealing with society too. Does that change their ability to operate and function in a well-being way?
Well, that's a good question. And we like to think that, because you're a believer and you should be growing spiritually on your own, that you should be able to handle everything that comes with you. Well, that's just not
We're just
reality.
human, right? Yeah.
Exactly. They're just human too. And yep, they do have a leg up on everyone else because I don't know how you do this life without the Lord, right? It's hard enough, So having that faith in Christ, but they need poured into, and that's really what he was talking about is, man, let's be proactive and pour into them so they can pour into these kids. And so, yep, they're going to be doing what they need to grow as well. But yeah, they're being influenced, they're being challenged, they're listening in the same way. And don't forget, you've got people that are 22, 23 in the classroom, and then you've got people like me who are 55, and then you've got people who are 65, maybe 70 still teaching. So they're at various places of their own spiritual maturity. And if I went to a government school my whole life, and let's say I'm a believer, right? But I didn't have access to a Christian school, so I went to a government school my whole life, went to public university, then I came out and decided I wanted to teach at a Christian school. Well, I don't have any training for this. I just am fortunate to be a Christian and a believer, but I don't know really what it is that you're asking me to do in terms of teaching with a biblical worldview or from a biblical worldview. I just know I'm a believer, but I've never been trained to teach math from God's perspective or history from God's perspective. I've just heard history. And so now we're saying, hey, this is a different ballgame. Whoa, time out. You don't just teach history here. You teach history from God's perspective. So you really have the pressure of growing and seeing the world from a whole different angle.
Never thought of it that way. The one thing that Dr. Walker talked about that he was building was that temperature check tool. What did you think of that? And do you have anything at your school that you've seen work really well so that you can help the teachers when they need help as far as spiritually or mentally or whatever it might be?
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think he's really on to something there, because I perked up too and wrote that down as he was talking, like, wow, temperature check. That's just a great even word picture for us to remember. So I really like that idea. I think the most that we do, and I think a lot of schools like us, is just consistently be surveying the teachers on a regular basis and saying, yep, how are you doing? What do you need? How are you doing? Where are you at? What do you need? Are you getting what you need? And so you're just constantly asking them on being real intentional on a regular basis. Google makes it easy these days. You're just putting out really quick little Google surveys, getting those results back as a leadership team and saying, oh, okay, our teachers are struggling with a calendar this year for whatever reason, or they need more early release time to deal with this new program that we put in place. That's a common thing that we leaders like to do, is we come across these great ideas and we say, hey, let's do this and let's make everybody change course, and we're going to teach reading a different way, or we're going to teach junior high math a different way, and we find this new thing that looks shiny and impressive, and then we just decide we're going to chase this down this, and then who has to do it is the teachers. And then usually in those surveys they'll come back and say, hey, wait, time out. I need more time to dive into this before I teach it. I'm not prepared. And then the leaders go, okay, I need to slow down a little bit, maybe roll this out in a little bit different way. So you just constantly have to be intentionally asking them and not make any assumptions, because we do see the world a little bit differently from those offices versus in the classroom. I think that's another thing worth mentioning, is when you're in the classroom, you have to be consumed by those 21, 22 kids in front of you, right? There's no world outside of those 22 kids. They are in front of you all day, every day. I mean, like I said, I don't want to exaggerate, but it is so true that we don't know what goes on in the world outside of what goes on in that classroom. And then all of a sudden the end of the day comes and you go, okay, what happened in the rest of the universe today? Because I just missed it. I have to be so locked into those kids. And you owe it to them, right? As a parent, you're glad to hear that, right? You want your teacher fully engaged. You don't want them playing on their phone. You don't want them, stressed out about their own personal life. You want them engaged with your child. So again, that's just another example of how consuming this profession is.
And then final question, I think we have time for one more. Begin with the end in mind. Tell me a little bit deeper about what you mean by that and what that means for a teacher and even for a parent. Like, how can we use that concept?
Yeah, that's a great one. And that is, and Collins was the first to really come out with that years ago when he wrote, Good to Great, or I think it was originally even in those, that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah, Stephen Covey. Yeah, exactly. And that was just so good to say, listen, in teachers would say, you must know, where do I want to be 180 days from now? Where do I want this child to be 2 years from now? And things like that. And we're really blessed to be able to do that in Christian schools. And I know government schools do that also, but we can do it from that heart and soul angle that says, boy, this is really the ultimate meaning and purpose as to why you're here. So I've got to keep that big picture in mind. I've got to keep the end in mind if we're going to get there and not get so consumed with the day-to-day that you get so bogged down and discouraged and this, that, and the other. And you know that, hey, to get to the goal line or to get the end line, we're going to have to ride that roller coaster. There's going to be good days and bad days, but it's all going to be worth it. You're going to cross the finish line and hopefully succeed and have that end picture in mind. Well, thanks so much for your questions. Thanks for following along. Thanks for staying in touch. And thank you again for joining me on extra credit version of this podcast. And until next time, again, this is Dr. Cy Smith with Clearly Christian. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Clearly Christian podcast with Dr. Cy Smith. Hear more episodes at clearlychristianeducation.com. If you'd like more information about Christian education in your neighborhood, or if you're interested in education opportunities at Mansfield Christian School, or if you agree with Dr. Smith and want to help him in his mission to influence and awaken Christian America, you can send Dr. Smith an email through the clearlychristianeducation.com website. Message him on the Clearly Christian LinkedIn or Facebook page, or call the Clearly Christian Connection line at 419-756-5651. This has been the Clearly Christian Podcast with Dr. Cy Smith on clearlychristianeducation.com, brought to you in conjunction with Mansfield Christian School, a Bryan Media production.